All around this schedule. Don't be like. Hey, listen, nice work with us. Of course, I have 15 million questions, but I'll limit myself.
Okay, I think we'll start the meeting. Well, folks, we're gonna call this meeting to order. Thank you. Are there any public comments for items not on the agenda for discussion but not action? Okay. We're gonna move on to town reports, town administrator report when you're ready.
Almost ready, sorry. All right, hi, everybody. All right, so TA report. So the town administrator report, not a lot on it, but it is a pretty heavy agenda in general. Just a couple of things worth mentioning on the town administrator report. So there is a planning board hearing that's coming up that's supposed to take place next Monday. We did receive an email from the chair today. Coastal Waters is required to meet ahead to make the recommendation. They were looking to meet tonight, but that wasn't possible with the select board meeting happening at the same time. And so it is looking like the meeting might possibly start next Monday and then have to continue into January until Coastal Waters could meet, provide the necessary recommendation to the planning board so that the planning board has the entire packet with that recommendation included, which is required based on our ordinance. But we will have any updated information online as it becomes available. All of the notices were sent out to all of the abutters and was posted in the newspaper relative to that. And the information is on the site. So pavement update. So we did have the gentleman who is now our point of contact for pavement and chip sealing come out to the island a while back, and we do have a scheduled meeting with him later in the week, where he's going to basically provide us some suggestions and cost estimates and recommendations in terms of how we can finish up some of the roads that we have left that need to be finished, to bring us to the completed project of all the roads being paved. When that information becomes available and any information that would potentially impact the budget, we will make sure that that is provided to you when that time comes. Any questions so far?
Vika, will you be able to post on the website or provide information about where the paving will be happening, which roads?
So when the paving happens, yes.
Okay.
Right now, I don't know until we speak to him, but it's the paving is either going to be next fall or even pushed back to a later time. But I think based on the timing, it's looking like a 2027, which would be next fallish is when it would take place, which would impact this upcoming budget process. But once we have a meeting with him on Thursday and get the information based on his visit here, then I'll have more information to share. When the time comes to do the actual paving, we'll likely send out information on the town website and text alerts so that people know which roads we're gonna be impacted.
Okay, and this completes the plan for everything, and I'm assuming another plan needs to be developed shortly
Correct.
thereafter.
This
right?
completes the paving roads.
Okay,
A plan needs to be developed and kept up with relative to gravel roads, and then a whole new plan in terms of how to maintain the roads that have been done.
thank you.
So, the next thing is relative to GEI communication. So GEI is the engineering company that we've been working with a lot of the projects. We were notified that the coastal engineer that we've been working with, Dan, is leaving and has left the company. And so we did meet today just to introduce the new individuals I'm not gonna name all the names who are listed in the TA report. Lisa is somebody that we have worked closely with, who has been here on several different presentations about a variety of different projects. Is going to be the lead contact on that project, and hopefully everything will keep moving smoothly in terms of us still continuing to be progressing with the projects that we've had, and there aren't any major delays due to the transition and the rollover that they've experienced in their office. Any questions? So TA report, that's really all I have. I do have a number of things that will be mentioned under the town administrator, under communications or other businesses. There were several other departmental reports. And so I'm not gonna bother going through them. They were all in the packet. I will just, see if the board or anybody has any questions relative to that. The only thing that's worth mentioning that it is related to TA Public Works Harbor Master is relative to the floats. I did get an update today from Public Works. The floats are being coordinated, and it is looking like the most cost-effective price is going to have them be stored at the Big Island Boatyard. And have the gentleman who we worked with last year, he would be the one that would still be involved in the maintenance and the upkeep of them, but the physical storing and the transporting is gonna take place and go to the boatyard. It's a little bit cheaper for us to do it that way than to have it be stored off-site at his location. And when we get the exact dates of that happening, we will advertise it. Typically, that's something that takes place on or around or after December 1st. So it is something that is gonna take place in the next couple of weeks. The two floats that have historically stayed in over the winter, those floats are going to, at this point, remain in the water just to accommodate the fishermen that have used it over the last number of years, but also make sure that we have a place for the fishermen to tie up and have a location, because for 2 weeks, Chandler's is gonna be unavailable for the fishermen that use that location. So that's the status in terms of the floats. Are there any other questions about any other reports?
Yeah, I noticed on the for Public Works 1124, retrieval of road signs found in the woods. Can we make an agenda item, because we realize this is getting ridiculous, and I think we need to get some cameras out there and find out who's doing this.
What we've noticed is when there is a break and some of the college students are back in town, that seems to be very well correlated to when some of the road signs go missing. So over the last couple of weeks, we have seen more signs go missing because some of the college students are back home from break.
I'd like to see that as an agenda item, because expensive. That makes sense.
Any more questions from the board on the TA or committee reports? And I have one question on the harbor master report. I noticed that the harbor master said that the shellfish committee has been dormant for some years and needs to be reestablished. I thought the state changed the requirement for that, but could you ask him to find out? Either way, if we aren't in compliance, then then I think we're not supposed to be handing. Because I think we aren't the only town that had trouble populating it when there isn't a really active harvesting of the resource there.
So that's everything for the town reports.
Any member of the public with questions on the town reports or the town administrator report? Okay, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which I believe is the fire department presentation. Or, yeah, so did you wanna, I think we have a memo in our packet which discusses sort of the proposal from the fire department, and is that correct, fire department, fire and rescue?
Yeah, fire department mostly.
Okay. For the purchase of a rescue boat.
Correct.
And so, is there anything else the fire department would like to add, you know, to the memo before we, anything else? Or the memo speaks for itself?
Yeah, I think it does.
Maybe you can give us a quick nutshell.
So, I
Stuff.
think the conversation started with you, Doug,
Yep.
I believe, yeah, posed this a couple months ago now. And we recognize the need to have a dedicated vessel for the fire. We've been borrowing the boatyard's workboat currently to go help Long Island and Peaks and other islands within the township. Respond to calls. So we're, just recognizing the need. There's also included a chart of Casco Bay with the local neighboring towns that have a fire or police boat. Only Portland, Long Island have boats that transport EMS boats. Everybody else is more of a fast rescue, none, aside from Portland, none of the boats have fire responding capabilities. And that's not really what we're looking for either. Mostly a rescue, water assist, we're not trying to replace what we currently have with TTC. Porting the patient off the island to Yarmouth. Just recognizing the need and trying to put motion forward to get another piece of apparatus to help us in the event.
Yep.
And it's also we have been responding to neighboring towns using either they would come get us, Long Island come pick us up, Chandler's to go respond to Long Island, or go over to Falmouth this summer a couple times, or for water related rescues. And we're an island surrounded by water. Sort of, yeah.
Okay, so I guess I'll open it up to questions from the board for Aldrich or Doug.
Hi, first I want to acknowledge that I'm an EMT, but I would like to ask make a couple of things as a select board person. First, I want to thank the Shabig Island Boatyard for their generosity in making that boat available. It's made a tremendous difference to the safety of people within the town of Shabig and the islands that we have mutual aid with. My question is really having to do with financials. So the needs of maintaining the fire department are big financially because we have some other equipment pieces that need to be in the pipeline for purchase and or replacement. So I don't know if this question goes to you or to the finance committee, but being able to have an inventory and a list of what those expenses are and how those are prioritized so that we can have a good sense about what is needed immediately and in the future, so that planning can be made both for capital plans and understanding the operating costs. So, thank you. When would we need that by?
So I guess, does anybody, the finance committee or the fire department want to respond to that? Sort of, are you planning to provide a prioritized capital list?
Probably Chief Monroe. Yeah, I think, yeah.
So John, you've been working with them, right? Yeah.
Yeah, all of the departments have been asked to review their capital assets and develop a replacement plan
Okay.
dates and replacement cost estimates.
Yeah.
So I would assume that this vote will be part of that list, that the target is to complete by December 15th.
Okay, and that will be completed, and that will not just that will include, well, not just an inventory, but what are the other,
Yeah, the things
Things
that I know
that-
are on that list are air tanks,
right,
this
Mhm.
boat,
yeah,
the tank truck.
yeah,
There are a couple other smaller items.
okay,
And then there's 3 other replacements of fire trucks that are 5, 10, 15 years out.
okay, good, thank you, so
And a
by
building.
December 15.
And a building, right?
Oh, and
And a
the
building. So in terms of prioritization of the capital items, is that each department's responsibility to say this is our highest priority, or is the finance committee ranking them? How is, by department,
I
how?
don't think the finance committee thinks our role is to prioritize these projects. I mean,
Yeah.
we're gonna have a input from the departments, and I think the select board, and then eventually perhaps the community is gonna have to prioritize some of these items.
But for example, with the fire department, where they may have multiple capital requests, would it make sense for them to identify their top priorities?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think part of it too would be how much funding is available. If somebody says, what's your priorities? The next question is, well, how much money do I have to spend? So, I think that, because they kind of, you can't actually go one before the other, they kind of have to go, joint. How much money is the town willing to devote to fire, and that might help them. So it's the cart before the horse, but it's part of the decision-making process of prioritizing.
And speaking with Ralph today, I mean, he thinks there could potentially be some funding available, but probably a match, not a full blown, you know, allocation. So anyway, what action are you looking for the board, from the board tonight?
Basically, question.
Yeah.
A lot of these things are floating figures, so it's. really
So-
hard to-
I think though, we're looking at something like $250,000-300,000, right? And you guys have a pretty good idea of what vessel you'd wanna purchase based on what other people have.
Based on who the neighboring town, like the picture I provided in the.
For Hartsville?
Yeah, Cundy's Harbor, it was a private donation, but that's close to what we're looking for. That's something that we can service here. Enough room for 3-4 passenger or crew, with some gear, just enough to get someone out of the water and quickly. Maybe a little pump, nothing plumbed into the boat, but something, yeah, fast response.
Well, Earhart, if you have a question, you go next.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I see Ellie at least helped put together this list of possible funding sources.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if somebody within a department that says to be explored is actually actively exploring sort of the feasibility of those being a real source, because that, again, could change the prioritization timing anyway.
Yeah.
So is somebody kind of assigned that task, or?
Not yet, but yeah, we will.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't hurt to do the legwork in advance.
Definitely, yeah.
And, you know, we'll have 2 fellows as of January, so maybe one of them could assist with that. It's, yeah, okay, Eliza. Okay, sorry, Richard.
I just wanted to say, I think you present an excellent case for why the votes needed. I just have a little question about, I know logistics are hard, but what is the chance that it could be used for some patient transport, or is that just not, there for this?
To be, I think to be, used for patient transport as we use CTC, like, it needs specific requirements, enclosed, ability to lock the stretcher and,
I understand that, but, as far as not to replace CTC, but to supplement it for some.
I
Transport,
think what he's saying is that the state has pretty strict requirements about,
when it has to be.
vehicles or, devices used to transport people that you would have to meet, and that may or may not be feasible.
yeah.
And I think there was mention of a Reeves that would be on
Yeah.
board and that is able to carry people, but not a patient, but not a stretcher.
Right.
So it would be able to transport someone
Could, yeah.
to EMS services.
Can you have more questions?
Yep, I promise just one.
No, it's fine.
Well, fiscally, understanding that these are big ticket items and we have so many big ticket items coming up for our town and with really critical infrastructure. I guess the comment that was made by you, Chip, that to say, well, we want to know how much can be spent. I guess I would like to know what are the needs to really adequately protect our citizens. And so I don't want it to first come from, this is how much money is available, but to first have a good grasp of the things that are needed and then prioritized with what is needed. Does that make sense, Chip?
Kind of. I mean, at some point, the numbers come into it quickly of, how much you have. These are likely bondable issues. They're big ticket items,
Yeah.
you say. So, if you say you get one of those, you get one of those three bondable
Right.
items.
Okay,
If that kind of stuff. So there are some parameters on expenditure, so.
but that way it's documented that these are the needs of the department. And it doesn't mean they'll all be spoiled, they're not all going to be met. But it keeps those items in the pipeline for future planning, but making sure it's planned also with an eye on what is really necessary. Yep, thank you.
Yeah, and I guess I would just add, it's obvious that there's a need. And I think we've been living off the generosity of the boatyard and the town of Long Island and, I think it's time. And it sounds like the calls are increasing in frequency.
Right, yeah.
And we did have a call to Hope Island this year.
Three.
And the Hope Island they're still in construction, but probably next summer or the one after, they'll be hosting retreats with customers. And multiple, 24.
So I think that, it's time we, became more self-sufficient. I think what we could use help from the fire department is, your prioritization of the items, there's a number of them that you need and kind of helping us. If this is your number one priority for, upcoming fiscal year or whether this is, a 3-year plan. And that's the kind of, information we need from you. And then ultimately, if it was going to be included in the 27 budget, then it needs to be included in the list that John mentioned. And then, we'd have to include it in the capital discussions and then we'd have to ultimately bring it to town meeting.
Mhm.
So and right now, we don't have a reserve fund specifically for the vote. So even sort of your sense of what the timeline is, are you trying to accomplish this sooner rather than later, or is this a longer time frame? But personally, I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, but I think it's something we need and we should, do. So I think it's our responsibility. Yeah. Can you can come on with that.
You mentioned we have another island fellow arriving?
Yeah.
And this one's duty is to do what?
The new island fellow has been working on the wildfire project for one thing, that's one of their priorities. They have a number of assigned duties that was given to them as part of the proposal we submitted to GPCOG. I honestly don't. Major one is the wildfire project, but there are some other duties. But it's possible they could help with this. I don't know how much time they'll
I
have.
would hope so, because it's a lot of work to do when we're not doing what else we're doing.
Mhm.
So we kind of lack that administrative help to move this thing along. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll keep that. Yep, Rita?
So a couple of comments leading into a question. So one is I did receive a communication from the harbor master who had heard that this conversation was gonna be taking place and wanted to answer that. He weighed in about the need that the harbor master sees from that end of things about a boat. And so I guess the question that I have to the fire department is, there hasn't been a boat for the,
Yes, what is it?
there hasn't been a boat for the harbor master the last couple of years, and he's expressing a need as well. And so does the fire department see that it'd be a shared thing?
Yes.
Or is this something that's gonna be separate? Cause I think that was a question that was raised by the harbor master. And then in terms of the assistance, the fire department does have an administrative secretary that has been budgeted for X amount of hours. The last year or so, those hours have not been fully absorbed and used. And so I know there's been a lot of transitions, but I think there is an opportunity for the department and maybe for the town to work where there is a position that's been created for those kind of assistances, and those hours have not been maxed out to even 75% capacity over the last year, due to the staffing of the people who've been in the position. So I think there is room for potentially finding additional help or some assistance that could cap that budgeted line item to offset some of the needs that the fire department might have. So,
I think it would be great to try to use that individual to help you pull your capital information together. It would be great if that individual is familiar enough with that they could work with the finance committee to kind of, I think that's the most urgent need, since it's due in essentially a little over a week and a half. So getting a pretty good handle on the capital needs and providing a schedule of replacement, cost and replacement to the finance committee would be the first step. And then, which would include this request too. So maybe, and the GP cocktail will not be here until, I don't know, mid to late January, so they won't be here for a while, but I think trying to pull together the paperwork and there is a form that the finance committee created for that information, right? So, and if you need help to do that, let me know. Maybe we can try to find you some help, but it would be helpful to have your administrative person in the process so they can be like the common thread going forward. I don't think they necessarily have to be the sole person to do it, but I mean, we all know Ralph is off island, very busy. And so I think in order to move these kind of things forward, it'd be helpful to have somebody who's accessible that can do that job. So we're happy to provide some help when the GP Hog Fellow arrives, but I think trying to pull this together for the finance committee in the next couple weeks would be important. So let us know what we can do to help on that on the short term. But I think this is a logical request, and I think, we support it, but I look to the fire department rescue to help prioritize all the capital requests that you're gonna have, because I think they're substantial. So.
And if the report is due on December 15 and our next meeting is 2 days later, even if it's not in final form, but seeing that the document with the amounts and the priorities is on its way, we can see the draft, that would be helpful.
Yeah, the finance committee presentation is
Yeah.
January 14th.
Right.
So we're gonna have some time to go back to the committees and
Okay.
pull all that together.
Yeah,
Thank you, Joan.
so that submittal is to the finance.
Oh,
committee.
finance committee.
So, great, thanks, guys, thank you. So any comments or questions from the public on 25-100, which is the discussion of the fire and rescue vote? Okay. Okay, next, 25-101, discuss archipelago's proposal for shoreline stabilization projects at 22 and 30 Waldo Point Road. And the potential inclusion of the town's right of way at Waldo Point Road in the project. So Vika, did you wanna start off with anything on that?
Yeah. So this is a proposal that was provided to you several weeks ago, and then the board really had to kind of put a stop to it because in line with some other projects, there were a lot of questions raised in terms of to what capacity and authority the select board had to proceed with some of these projects, especially when it came to having offers of financial contribution from outside sources be provided. So this particular project, it's actually a 40-foot right of way down Waldo Point Road. The abutters on either side are looking to do a stabilization project. They came to the town with a recommendation, seen as the town piece is smack in the middle of it. The proposal was brought in front of you. It had been discussed. It kind of got tabled. Now it's being brought back. I had connected with the FEMA representative that we have. I shared the proposal with them. And basically, so there is a memo in here for you, basically where things stand with this particular project. Based on the scope of work that FEMA suggested for the work and what is being proposed, they're not very compatible. Because of the type of material that is being proposed in this particular location. And then also at the same time, the recommendation to pay for half of the cost by the abutters is not something that FEMA is saying could be done. So in this particular project, the recommendation is the proposed cost is estimated at about $40,000. That does not include between $600 and $8,500 worth of permitting fees. The abutters recommended to pay $20,000 of that cost. Where FEMA is looking at it is the money that is being received from FEMA and then the offer to pay for half of it. You're double dipping in the funds is how they're looking at it. And so what the recommendation is for this particular project is FEMA made it clear that looking at this location, we had initially submitted the information and they took it as a 33-foot right of way when it's in fact 40 feet. They are able to, based on the scope of work, to reopen this particular location and said that there are some additional mitigation costs that the town could receive. They did strongly encourage to not use private funds in this particular case and to be cautious in terms of the type of project that's being proposed versus what FEMA had recommended. We did also engage with an opinion from the town attorney, and the town's attorney was somewhat similar recommendation, but the town attorney recommendation was well, private funds could be used, which when we engaged with the attorney, he wasn't aware of all of the full details of it. But the recommendation was that if you wanted to do full transparency and really make it that it's a decision that is done, you could bring it to the voters and have the voters decide of the private funding aspect of things. But where things stand now, what the board needs to do is basically decide based on the work as it's proposed, to either determined to engage with the particular stabilization project and move forward working with the contractor and the property owners, or decline the proposal, and then have it be recommended that they move forward on their own, and then when the town is ready, that the town proceed with deciding what to do, in that particular location.
So, all
I
right,
have a number of questions. So for that particular project, which FEMA's offered, is authorized to 6,500 and some change. What was the total budgeted cost for that design?
So, the town does not have a total budgeted cost for the design, but what the town received was a proposal.
Not from these people, but for the one that FEMA is willing to support.
And this is where things get a little complicated for that particular area. So Waldo Point, Willow, Central Landing, and Fenderson were three access to shore roads that were combined as one FEMA project.
Okay.
So what they did is they determined based on each location what the work needed to be done, but they combined it into one, and they gave us a total dollar amount. And so the FEMA document was in the packet. There were some highlighted information where it was specific to Waldo Point Road. The cost estimate that was in the memo is really relative to what the cost associated with replacing the steps that used to be there, but also some mitigation costs. And so when I raised the question of how do we determine the exact dollar value? So East Shore Drive, South Shore Drive, Stone Pier, we have an exact dollar number that was given for that particular project.
Right.
This is different because there were 4 locations combined. The question that was raised was, how do we determine the exact dollar number for that particular location? We know the replacement of the steps and we know some of the mitigation cost, but I'm not an engineer, so knowing how many cubic yards of gravel and what that cost estimate, I can't figure that out without asking somebody. So when asking that question, what was said was, based on this particular project, we had X amount of dollars that were given, which off the top of my head, I apologize, I don't have
That's
that number, I don't remember that number. For all 4 locations, that money could be used how you see fit for any of those 4 locations. So you can put all of it to Willow, you can put all of it to Waldo. The most important part is not which locations the funds were used for these 4 projects, but how the work is complete. And the work needs to be complete and then aligned with what FEMA recommended and is proposing in order for the town not to get into the situation after the work is being complete, when you have to submit the final reporting to the federal government of the work completion, and they look at that the work that is done is compatible to what they expected it to be done.
Okay,
Does that
so,
make sense?
yes, it does, but, so, I'm sorry, I kind of want to follow this trail a little bit. So did FEMA have a design intent for Waldo Point, on which is the $6,567 adequate to achieve that design, or is that only a contribution towards that project, which the town will have to come up with the rest? And if that's so, I'm just trying to get a sense of how much more that is.
So the town's not really gonna know how much it is without doing something like going to an engineer and having them
Okay.
design that particular location. These numbers and this scope of work was brought and asked, GEI, we did ask them briefly, can you take a look at it? Their comment was that there's not enough information in the documents provided to make the full determination. But it really comes down to the type of work that the abutters are trying to do to save their houses.
Sure.
Is not necessarily the type of work that FEMA is expecting the town to do for the right of way.
Okay, so my next question related to that is, and you said a minute ago, we could spend those funds for those 4 different separate projects, however we wish. In other words, we could take that pot of money and do all Fenderson or wherever, and not necessarily do all the point. It doesn't sound, from what you said, that we would be penalized for not spending the money at Walden Point. Would that be accurate?
Correct, it's just how the work is done.
Okay, so then,
The concern that the FEMA representative had was the proposed work as it was read in this report that was provided to the town is not compatible to what their anticipated scope of work is.
right, but if we're not using the FEMA monies for that work, then
It doesn't matter, so the tricky part is this location has been designated and has been reported as a project by FEMA. So unless the town wants to go to FEMA and say, we want to remove this location and give the money back.
Right.
The town has an obligation to proceed and see through to some of the work being in alignment with what FEMA is recommending, because what they're looking at is the damage that was done, the material to replace it to pre-storm condition, how much would that cost, and mitigation efforts. The mitigation efforts that they're looking at and putting it back to pre-storm condition does not include the type and the level of the material that's being proposed to protect the abutters property.
but it also doesn't include the engineering plan required to do what they want us to do, correct? In other words,
No, it can.
It can include it.
but what I'm saying is the $6,500 and change is not gonna be. That's a small amount of money. I'm just, as we look at all these projects and I'm going, that's not going to cover anywhere close to what it's gonna cost us with the engineering.
That is
and
more
else.
or less the cost of replacing the steps. And some mitigation, so if you look through the report, there are a couple areas where they give specific dollar values. Where they don't give the specific dollar values in this particular report is basically the material and the cost associated with the material that was there that was lost.
Okay, so then, if we would have to forfeit the $6,500 because we wanna go with this plan, we're gonna gain $20,000 from the abutters, assuming, all other things, we can do it in a legal and sensible way. We'd be giving up 6,500, but we'd be gaining 20. Right? So to me, it's like,
Well, but we have a cost of 46.
And you'd be paying, so the cost so what was recommended is the abutters would pay 20, the town would pay 20.
Plus,
Right.
And then in addition that, they would pay whatever the permitting fees are.
but I suspect that we are gonna pay that kind of money to do the FEMA supported project anyway.
No.
And no?
No, I don't think we've come close. Because, and I think that's what we said, the scope of the stabilization project for the property stabilization is much more substantial, understandably. I mean, it includes concrete blocks to stabilize the slope.
Right.
What we're talking about is repairing the town right of way to pre-storm conditions. I don't expect it would be anywhere near, $46,000.
So then the first decision we as a board and the town need to make is, do we want to robustly repair the area or just put it back the way it was? I think that's the first question to make, and knowing that, given that putting it back the way it was, leave it as, I'm assuming, I'm not an engineer, but I'm assuming with some level of vulnerability it had before, which then potentially impacts the abutters on both sides from the way wave action works. If you have a hardened area here, the hardened area here, but a soft area in the middle, over time, that's not gonna work very well. So I mean, I think that's the first decision we as a board have to make. Do we wanna just return it to original condition and call it good? Or do we wanna do something more robustly?
And I guess relative to this, so we did ask the engineering firm that's working with the town to look at this. To get an idea of what it would cost. And because the plan is relatively vague, we don't know what's being proposed for the town repair. by the,
VI was not able to give us that answer, so
Right.
without the town going and saying this 40-foot right of way, can you provide us a scope of work of what stabilized and put in steps and cost? The best example we'd have is what was provided by the company and, you know, by Mike Morris.
Right,
but I would say that I don't think any of the right-of-way projects that the town would undertake would approach the nature of the stabilization that's going on, you know, that's being proposed by Archipelago
Mhm.
for the, you know, two private properties. So I don't, personally, I don't see that this is a financial benefit to the town because the cost that we'd be committing to without really knowing the scope would be 26 to, you know, maybe $30,000. That's a lot more than I think we would expect to spend on managing our coastal access points, you know, all four of them, I think is right, what we have. So, you know, I think personally, I think that's, you know, that's a lot more money. That's more than all of the four combined.
Mhm.
So that's where, you know, I would look at it.
Right,
If-
just
if-
trying to wrap my
Right.
head around the thought process, so.
Right.
What I hear you saying, and that's totally fine, is that. In these, at least at Waldo Point, that our intention or our desire is not to do anything more than sort of bring it back to where it was. And if that's the case, then then the rest of it is sort of, our decision is pretty easy. Then it's like, well, then no, we don't want to participate in this because it's not consistent with the town's objectives to build this robust, hardened, you know, landscape on our right of way. And that's fine. I just,
And that was, I mean, that unfortunately was the takeaway that I received through the conversations. The benefit that the town has that I think maybe the abutters don't have is there's a decent amount of ledge right in front of the right of way. So there is a level of protection that unfortunately the abutters on either side don't have.
okay,
And so the town's engineering firm, through their brief feedback, indicated that the need for the town right away is not the same need that is for the abutters. And so going to the same level of extreme for the protection isn't, you know,
Warranted.
it's not worth it for the town to proceed with that. But it is, you know, it's obviously in front of the select board for a decision and for you to decide how you wanna move forward with this.
yeah, no, it's very helpful in the process.
And we don't have any infrastructure, you know, behind this, you know, we don't have a building that we're trying to protect. It's
yeah.
just access. So, and I think the other thing is I think what I understand that Archipelago asked us to make a decision sooner rather than later because they want to move forward with their project.
Mhm.
The other part of this was that, you know, they would do the design and sort of be our consultant. In other words, we had to jump in on the project fully as a participant and, you know, pay the permitting fees outside. And I'm not sure if I'm not sure that's something the town would want to do. It's not a consultant that we hired. And I'm not sure it gives us as much autonomy as we might want to have on the project. So I think I think our objectives, like you say, and I think that's the important thing, is different than the property owner's objectives in terms of the level of protection that we need for a town right of way. And typically, based on past storms, we haven't, you know, done extraordinary measures to restore the access points. You know, it's modest. Pleasant.
It seems to me that public access to our shores needs such strong protections now and for the future. And we need it for the fishing industry and we need it for the citizens to have access. And when I go to Waldo point, I wonder how much of the public is using that access point. Especially since it can be a bit treacherous, and when there is access down the road onto the flatter rocks that open into the cove, there's easy and much safer access there. Especially to a beach area that's safer to walk in, and it seems to me the access place, the 40-foot piece we're talking about, is not used for any commercial fishing. And I don't know how much the public is using it for commercial access to that beach. So here is my question. Do we have to keep it? Do we have any options about not identifying that as a public access point?
You would have to go to town meeting and you would have to have the voters forfeit that right of way to shore.
Okay,
You'd have to, I'm assuming, work with the abutters and the town attorneys to have the abutters take it over. I would strongly discourage the town from doing that, because I think what you're gonna find is other areas where you have similar 33, 40-foot right of way, right between property owners, with some of them going very personally by their houses, similar to that case. You might get people coming to you saying, if you forfeited this right away, can we talk about this? And I think that's the challenging part that the town's also dealing with in terms of private funding being incorporated and suggested is, it's similar. It's when you make a decision on one access to shore or one location, keep in mind what that's going to do and what kind of precedents you're setting for that taking place across the entire island, and the expectation that you would need to really to accommodate and be fair to everybody across the board.
and I really appreciate that comment. What I do think about is we do have access points that are regularly used by the public. It just seems to me this isn't one.
I think it is sometimes used by commercial fishermen, I don't know, but I would say that one alternative is to, improve the access. And so there is funding available through the state, and it will be, available this spring, that we could apply for funds to, improve the access to the point in a way that's compatible with the use, which is access, not, a bulkhead for protection.
Thank you.
Richard?
Would it be possible to use the FEMA money just to fix the should be right away spot?
Yeah.
And let the two neighbors pay for their part? Sure. It'd be sort of like sharing Chandler's dock. Chandler's dock is what, 20%
Well,
run by the town?
I
Whatever
think,
the numbers are, but
Yeah.
the fact that we just do our
Right.
concern and they pay for everything else.
I think that, so my understanding is those are the two options. One is that we join the project and, as a whole, or we do our project independently with the fund. So if we join it as a whole, our share would be 20,000 plus 6,000 to 8,000. So that would be what we would be responsible for, but we don't exactly know what the project would be. Or they can go ahead with their two projects independently, and we can do our FEMA mitigation.
Seems clear.
Yeah,
And it seems like what we're saying is that we are satisfied and consistent with the values and purposes of our work that we want to get done there, to stick with the FEMA project as proposed and let them do what they want. Which, I mean, I don't know if I would make a motion for that, but.
I don't think so, but I think what we're responding to is a request from Mike Morris that the town make a decision so they can move forward.
Right, fair enough.
That's why it's, they feel some urgency on their end to kind of get moving on this. So,
So I just want to make a statement that making sure that we do it in concert with what is expected with this FEMA money, since it's such a big piece of what we're using to pay for so many projects here in the island, is important. And making sure that we keep in the integrity of that application seems very important. Okay.
We'll stay on the good side.
Yeah. Thank
So, any other questions from the board on the Waldo Point project? Any comments or questions from the public?
So the action will be a letter back to them.
I guess, Vika, what are you looking for action here? Is just a response to Mike that the town, I mean.
So is it my understanding that the town or the select board is in agreement collectively that you do not want to engage to participate in this particular project, and you want me to let Mike Morse know that they can proceed working with the abutters, and the town will revisit Waldo Point Road right away in the future when it is better and more appropriately time appropriate to handle.
Well, we're just gonna let them know we're consistent with the FEMA grant that we're going to.
So to let them know that they can proceed with their project,
All right,
and the
well,
town is not going to
Right.
participate with the 40-foot right away. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes. Sounds like it.
And to just clarify what it would be on our part is what the plan was once we tackled Bell Shore Drive, that then we would have, you know, an engineering firm tackle all of the right of way projects in the context of the award that we got and sort of give us guidance on what needs to be done on those four, I think it's 4 right of ways.
Or right of ways under this particular
Under
project,
this,
correct?
with the
Yeah.
FEMA money.
We don't really have a good sense of what that'll be for this particular project.
No, but it
Won't
won't
be
be,
anywhere.
won't be huge,
Yeah, okay.
right?
One of the things that Loren is working on with the access to shore work that she's doing is bringing forth a recommendation, which she actually sent an email with basic recommendations about, based on the work that has been done on her end, what does she see as suggested improvements in each location that is going to improve access and the area for each individual location. So I think all of the town access to shores should be visited in the near future, kind of collectively. But I think prior to doing that, South Shore Drive, East Shore Drive, there is a huge chunk of cash from FEMA that was received for that, we haven't even engaged in it with an engineer on that. Stonework, we received some funds too. So there are other locations that you know, need to be visited as well.
And we'll need an engineering report study done on each of those spots.
I don't think it's gonna be a substantial engineering report, I think, you know, I think it's really, Loren's suggestions combined with an engineering look. It's sort of more the level of, well, hopefully not what we've been through, but like a part, you know, it's really a repair.
Okay.
And a lot of towns have gone out and done these things without any kind of engineering guidance.
Okay,
So it may not take, you know, we're not talking about a full-blown design like a wall that's being proposed here.
Okay.
And so, and I guess while Jeff is here, I just wanted to thank, you know, the abutters for, you know, coming to the town and proposing a combined project. And we appreciate your, you know, interest and willingness to try and collaborate on the project.
Let me ask a quick question. The project is properly, I think, viewed as different along your 40 feet as it is to protect the homes. One of your concerns tonight was the cost of an inclusive 40-foot section as opposed to the FEMA proposal. Would you like me to have the marine contractor specifically separate out your 40 feet so you'll know exactly what the cost would be? We're going on the presumption for the abutters that we're be paying $1,000 a linear foot. But because you are ledge it could be substantially less for you. So if you would like, I can ask you to have like a written.
Well, speaking for myself, I think the proposed cost is about 40. And, you know, the proposal that we have before us tonight, I think we've decided we have a consensus not to move forward on. I think, and partly because the engineering firm that we work with said, you know, you're fairly well protected with the ledge that we have there over, you know, the offshore ledge that kind of protects the right of way of it from wave action. So I think in terms of this specific proposal, we're gonna decline. And it sounded like Archipelago wants to move forward with your permitting, so.
They would like to continue the process.
Yeah, so I don't wanna hold you up. I think the town is probably gonna be in, you know, in the driver's seat on their projects. And I think what we need is probably a much smaller scope of repair and maybe some stabilization than what you guys need, so.
I have proposed to the contractor and Archipelago that we start on the far ends first and then work across and finish at the right of way to give the board more time to consider. But I think we can pretty much say tonight that you would prefer not to be part of it.
Well, and I think the state would require you to permit the full project before you can start, so they'd wanna look at the project completely and permit that before you could construct. If it turns out, you know, I think frankly, the town kind of operating independently is the simplest thing, and we can do that, and, you know, if construction turns out construction overlaps and there's something we can share, we can pursue that then.
Okay.
That sounds
No,
reasonable, but I
that's
do.
important because I'll report back to Archipelago.
Yeah.
They weren't able to attend tonight, but I'll let him know.
Yeah, and I think people will respond.
Yeah, I'll connect with him first thing in the morning and email him. And I think it comes down to, unfortunately, I think it's the scope of work that you need for your protection versus the scope of work that is needed in the right of way. They're
Not
two
trying to
different
protect the
things, and that's,
Right.
I think, the challenging part is having that 40-foot smack in the middle between two property owners that are working to protect their homes versus a right of way, which on the hierarchy of things, you know, is
Well, it was an
a
idea.
right of way.
Well,
It was an idea to combine.
Yeah,
That's a good idea.
so we really do appreciate you suggesting it and, you know, trying to collaborate.
It's unfortunate
Yeah.
that it couldn't have worked out as smoothly as
Okay, I understand.
it would have been.
I wish you lived on, next to South Shore Drive. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, speaking of, so nothing else on Waldo Point, 25, so we're gonna move on to the next agenda item, 25-102, and this is to discuss and define the process for the select board to select the design alternative for South Shore Drive and the steps for town approval and funding. So this is another FEMA related project, and again, Vika, I think she put a memo in the packet, but Vika, is there anything else you wanna add to that?
No, I've reached out to the newer point of contact that we have now that the project is closed. We have a different point of contact, and Joshua has been very responsive, and the reason that I reached out to him was really to raise the question in terms of, can FEMA reopen the case because the scope of work as it's been presented by GEI, whether it's option 1 or option 2, is more than what they have committed on the project. And the answer that we received, and I ended up speaking to him a couple different times because I wanted to make sure that it was very clearly understood, is that South Shore Drive was a project that was committed as a road project. But the physical road does not have any damage. It's impeding onto it, but the damage isn't on the road, the damage is on the embankment. And I think because of possibly the individual at the very beginning who we had that didn't really know what he was doing. I think that him being there in this case benefited the town because it committed us as a road project. And we've received nearly the full $1 million, which they consider a small project, $1 million or less. So for them, it's a small project. Obviously, for a municipality such as this, it's a large project. But by the time the town share, the FEMA share, the state share, the total cost came in at $975. With about half of that being mitigation. If the town went back and reopened the project and it got resubmitted as an embankment stabilization, you could automatically take the mitigation money off the table. So the $470,000 in change that was received by the town for mitigation efforts would not be taken into consideration for embankment. They will give us the $400,000 in change for putting it back to pre-storm condition, but mitigation efforts would not be included in that. And so at that point, I shared with him the information that we received from GEI and asked for some feedback in terms of, can you take a look at this? This is what the town has in front of them. The town needs to make a decision based on what FEMA is recommending and making sure that the money is not lost, or we're not in the position in a couple of years where we have to submit the scope of work and what was done. It's determined that it wasn't done compatible to FEMA, that it was we would be putting ourselves in the position of having to give some, if all of it back. And that's when he came back and said, based on that information, it appears as though option one is more compatible, and that he recommended that the town proceed with that particular option. If the town chooses to move forward with option two, it is a choice that the town can do, but it's gonna put the town in the position of reopening the case, which could put the town in the position of not getting the full money that we've received. So if they have to reopen it, they're revisiting all of it and kind of recalculating all of that information. And he really indicated that, well, the town feels like they didn't receive as much as what the final cost could be, that they received a good chunk of cash and more money than I think he felt like we could have received. I'm not sure, that's the sense that I got. And that he really did recommend that don't try to talk to FEMA to reopen anything, just keep it as it is, be happy with the money that you received. His recommendation is move forward with option one, and that would put the town in the best position to have that, $870,000 in change that we actually have in the bank to cover towards the cost of this. So, and the decision for you to make is
Not really.
which option you want to engage GEI in for a design, so then we can proceed with getting information from them to actually do the design, which at that point we would put it out to bid, because we have to go out to bid in order for it to be approved by FEMA. At that point, we would collect the bids, we would determine, as you as a board would determine which company to engage with. And then that should all stagger in line according to GEI for us to be able to have a general idea of the cost estimate and what the project could look like in terms of cost and timing. So then in June by town meeting, there would be a good idea of how much money to ask the taxpayers if there's a cost difference, and what the scope of the project could look like.
Well, given the scenario you just described, I feel like we're sitting at a blackjack table and I probably wouldn't ask you to hit again. I'd rather take the money that the representative from FEMA said is most likely going to, not mess things up. Take the project that's not gonna mess things up. And I don't think we wanna put ourselves in a position of finding out we have to get money back and have a much more expensive project.
Can I ask a question?
In a second. No, not at the moment. Okay. So, yeah, Richard, did you have a?
No.
Okay. So I think, and I actually joined one of these conversations because I just wanted to be sure too that I understood, where, how this process works and I heard exactly the same thing from the FEMA representative. I think in a way we've benefited from some earlier generosity that we, from the inexperienced project manager potentially, this is kind of reading between the lines, but if you might recall, and I don't remember who asked the question, but at the prior meeting, somebody asked the question, is it possible to reopen, these projects to get the full funding? And that's really where Vika started, was asking that question, can we revisit this because we think it's gonna cost more money? So that, continues with this conversation. And I would say that it is a pretty substantial award compared to what other communities in the, other towns in the area for similar types of damages. So I think he's, being pretty straightforward about that. So then we did also, in the context of Dan Bannon's departure and working with GEI, we did speak with them. And so really the next step, once we decide on a design alternative, the next step would be they'll prepare a proposal for preparing basically a 30% design, which would include, a pretty reliable cost estimate. Not to say that the bids might not come in a little bit different, but they're working on a lot of current projects, so they have sort of real-time numbers for the cost for construction. So our goal would be to get them to submit a proposal potentially by the next select board meeting, which we could then review and approve. We did confirm with FEMA that the FEMA funds can be used for the engineering design, so it's not just construction, so we can move forward with that. And then they would prepare a 30% design, and then from there, we would decide on the next steps, but we would have to, as Vika said, go out for bid. The goal being to go to town meeting with approval to move forward with the project, and if there is a differential, that, the town would fund that. We've also, as you're aware, we've also had offer from residents in the area to provide private funding to supplement what, if there's a cost beyond the FEMA award, in which case we could, evaluate that option too at that time. But I do think the next step is really for us to decide on an option and then to pull the trigger to have the 30% design prepared so we can get closer to what, are an actual cost and keep the ball, rolling. Yep.
Just if you were saying at some later sign of some of the, abutting property owners wanted to, help maybe add more to increase the design, but don't we run across the same problem with jeopardizing the FEMA funding if?
Yep. I mean, yeah.
It's slightly different.
Yes.
So with the Waldo Point Road, the way they looked at it was that, they were offering to pay for half of the cost. In this particular case, they're viewing it as to offset the cost difference. In which case, there's less concern, but you need to know what that cost difference is, and that absolutely has to go to the voters for approval. And so in this memo, in writing this memo, I did initially put that, the first choice that the board needs to do is to determine which option you want to proceed. The other choice is to determine the funding. Ultimately pulled that out and kept that separate because, well, I understand the residents are eager to have that answer. The town does not know what that difference is or what that difference could be. And so before going to the voters and saying, do you want to engage into the conversation of private funds supplementing the cost difference, it would be more efficient and effective to determine what the costs are, what the project scope of work is, what that cost is, what the difference is, and then determine what that question to the taxpayers would be.
But it's really making up the cost difference it's not, if they wanted to make the design more robust. Right, in other words, we pick option one and say that the abutters wanted to beef it up. Do more work than what option one is, that would jeopardize the FEMA money, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's my understanding. And so what I'm just trying to do here is separate, I think the proposal to accept public funds is sort of a separate issue. I think right now we just need to based on what we heard from FEMA and based on what you said yourself, the blackjack table, I think we need to decide on, what the next step, which option we're gonna move forward with, then start that process so that we can come down to what an actual cost will be and, in order to make it in time for town meeting.
Got it.
David,
Before we open the floor, I would like to remind us to be sure to get the names of the people who are commenting
yeah,
for the record. So just to.
Yeah,
remind us of that.
David's right, and I've been, remiss, so when you do come up to speak, if you could just say your name and your, where your residence is, that would be a good idea. Thank you. Any other questions on this, conversation with FEMA at this point from this group? Eliza Jane?
I just, it's so many ramifications of minute changes, but they're enormous for this project. Once again, making sure that we're not jeopardizing our FEMA funding, at the same time maximizing the protections that need to be done there. Once again, can you just say it again, how this is different from Waldo Point?
So with Waldo Point, the offer was to cover half the cost of the work.
Okay.
In this case, the residents offered to cover the difference of the offset.
And how does FEMA view that?
So and this is where, there was a statement in my memo that I think might be slightly confusing and maybe even misleading. So with this particular project, the way FEMA views the cost difference, so they said that it's $975,000 is the cost to put it back to pre-disaster and do some mitigation efforts. About half of that is bringing it for disaster, half of it is mitigation efforts. GEI is coming back $1 million to $1.5 million. The way FEMA is viewing is that cost difference is really the town taking the initiative to do additional features. So they wouldn't necessarily perceive as many plantings and natural embankment bushes, whatever will end up ultimately going in there to the extent as what's being proposed in GEI. And so if the FEMA is saying that the cost of this is $975 and the cost is gonna come back at 1.1, and the residents are saying that we're gonna contribute $150,000, they're not contributing that $150,000 to the $975 number, it's above and beyond that. Whereas in the Waldo Point Road, the way that you've read the proposal, it was you're taking the $40,000 cost for the entire project and private property is funding 20% when you're also getting something from FEMA, so you're double dipping, and that's where they saw the difference there.
Click, I
Does
get it.
that make sense?
Thank you.
And I think the memo from, or the email from the FEMA representative is pretty clear. He's basically saying, he does not recommend altering the scope of work, and given that the scope of work that looking at the GEI report, the scope of work for option one closely aligns with what they have in the FEMA allocation. And to be honest, the estimate of it was 1 to 1.2 million for that. It could be a lot closer. It could be, 995,000. We don't know yet. So we don't necessarily know what the differential would be above and beyond for the GEI design versus what FEMA has awarded us. But I do think we did get a pretty substantial award that should come close to the cost of the project. And so the difference, based on very rough numbers from GEI, the difference would be on the order of, you know, at the most, 250,000, I think. But, so given that, I think the next step, I think it would make sense is to, you know, decide how we want to move forward, get a 30% design, get some actual quotes for the cost, so we really know where we stand. The FEMA aspect funding is not going to change unless we decide to reopen it. So that kind of leaves us with, you know, the path forward in my mind, but it's up to the board. It, like he, you know, we have every right if we do want to reopen the project. It just has a big risk.
Yeah, sounds.
Yeah, we don't want,
Move forward.
we don't want to do clawbacks.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So,
So what is the sense of, I guess we can next take, because, I think we had some people who wanted to provide some comments, so why don't we do that before the board makes a decision, so go ahead, Bruce.
Bruce Anderson.
Yeah, and I guess you're gonna stand up.
You have to say it on TV.
Stand and deliver.
I have a question and a comment. The question is,
You have to start with.
Laura.
There's a-
Name and address.
Anyway, if you look at what FEMA has provided for an estimate, and you look at the GEI proposal, there's more detail in the FEMA estimate. There's not much in the GEI proposal. But they both have the same outcome. They're both looking to stabilize the embankment. The point, though, is that after that, they kind of go like this. We have hardscape on the bottom, and then there's the vegetation issue, which FEMA says they don't want to pay for above the hardscape. FEMA's advocating for 260 soil nails to stabilize that part of the bank. That means 260 holes that have to be drilled. They're 30 feet deep, a 30-foot 1-inch steel rod that has to go in there, and then they all have to be grouted. $975,000. I don't know. I mean, I look at the estimate. The gentleman that did it used means. Means is basically a dictionary for construction estimating. It kind of, you know, it's very broad. It attempts to kind of narrow things down by saying, well, if you're in the Northeast, it's this, it's it. But it's not a construction estimate. It really isn't. So if my question, I guess, is how insistent are they that in order to maintain the funding, that you follow exactly what it is that they lay out in their scope, if you want to call it that, in their worksheets that includes the soil nails versus the veg. In other words, is the outcome more important, or is how you get there more important?
I think they're both in line with one another. So one of the things that has been clearly stated is whether it's option 1 or option 2, they're both temporary
Which
solutions.
often do, because that's gonna sacrifice. The reality is they can't afford to get rid of the money, so.
And so, I mean, regardless of what the town does, I think taking proper steps or being mindful of the steps are taken is important, because especially now, because it's been very clearly stated to us that we could jeopardize having some of the money be given back to them. And so I think that, well, it might be maybe frustrated for the residents that it looks like we're moving in a snail's pace, making sure that the proper steps are taken to get to the construction is gonna provide a solution that's still not gonna be the full permanent solution, and that's something that he did state in the conversation is, have you talked to the residents about moving the road entirely, because that's your permanent solution?
Yeah.
And so I
don't
think,
You and I.
So-
talk these things.
So to answer your question a little bit, we did have some of that discussion. So GEI had FEMA design before they prepared their conceptual
They did.
design. So they had used that as a basis for their design. And what he did say is functionally, you know, if you can potentially modify it as long as it's performing the same function. So soil analysis may not be required if we can demonstrate the same kind of thing.
Okay.
And so GEI is aware of that.
Okay.
I think that's really, and those two designs reflect GEI's sort of interpretation of, you know, the FEMA.
like GEI and FEMA both recognize that the information wasn't exactly the same in either reports. What FEMA reiterated was that the information that they saw in option 2 was satisfactory enough to them to feel confident that that project is going to be compatible with what their
So
expectations.
again, this is what I wrote you the other day, because I'm still, the additional features. They apply only to option 2.
So. No, so what FEMA is. Hold, let me think about how to word this, so I don't.
I guess what
The
I'm saying,
mitigation
in
that-
option 1, the vegetation is there.
In option 2, it's full river.
And what he,
But I guess what I'm saying is option 2 really isn't an option. I mean, I think that's probably pretty much the consensus. I mean, it's, and that's fine. I mean, it is what it is. But the reality, okay, is I'm not sure why they're hung up in this vegetation. Because option 1 from GEI includes the vegetation. Option 1 or the option for FEMA doesn't.
so what they were saying is to us, is that, for example, for, say, we go forward with option 1, the cost for the vegetation could easily be provided by separate private funding, because it's not within FEMA's scope. So either the town's gonna pay for that on their own, or we could take private funding for that. It's not, we will still meet the requirements of the FEMA design. So it is, so that, and that made sense to me. So in other words, that additional, you know, the vegetation, which is, and would be required frankly by the DEP anyway, would, you know, could be, we could use these supplemental funds to pay for that
Without jeopardizing.
without jeopardizing our FEMA award. He did say very clearly that if we went with option 2, that would be a scope of work change and we would have to resubmit the whole project and we could jeopardize particularly the mitigation function.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I had concerns like you, so I asked Beaker, we talked to him again, and you know, he was pretty clear and he seems pretty knowledgeable. FEMA's FEMA. I mean, we cannot, they have their idiosyncrasies in terms of how they operate. I will say this is better than the old days where they are awarding, you know, mitigation money to do more than just replace. It used to be just put back, you know, where it was, so it's just gonna happen again. This is a little bit more than what was there, so that to me is progress. And, you know, I think the goal would be, you know, the goal would be to do what's gonna be functional and, you know, look reasonable and, you know, perform the function. And still be able to accept the, you know, almost $900,000. So that to me seems like the best deal for the town, the best deal for the residents. And I will say that while we're, you know, we can be operating on parallel paths here, there is probably gonna be a gap between what FEMA awards and what the project will actually cost. But I mean, I think we can pursue some other alternatives through infrastructure grants that are gonna be available to potentially fill that gap. At the same time, you know, we'll know better when we get to town meeting where the money, how much it's gonna be and where it could come from. It might have to, you know, so that's, and it might only be $50,000, it might be $200,000. We don't know that right now.
No, I think basically you've answered my questions. I'm concerned about how flexible FEMA is gonna be to respect to scope.
It's,
Because obviously the two don't really, you know.
Yeah, I agree, the two, but I will tell you that the design as proposed by GEI for option one is acceptable to FEMA, is what I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
It did seem like there was a question in his eyes between one and
Yeah, I
two.
think
He didn't raise any concerns with option one, option two. He made it very clear that you're gonna put yourself in a position where you might have to give significant money back.
So that's kind of where I would say they are not flexible, is the big picture of kind of the functionality of the overall stabilization. But whether you use soil nails or, you know, geotextile, I think they're flexible. That's the objective of the action, but I think the two projects as a whole, you know, to him, the second one was a change of scope. And beyond what they would.
I think. Not being privy to that conversation. His letter, all right, and your synopsis, okay, it looks like there's not a whole lot of room for movement with FEMA. You know, this is what we're giving you, and it's kind of our way of the highway, that's.
I think you're right in some sense where it really made the town narrow down on which option they had to focus on.
But, and that's what his email to us says, which is in the packet. I assume you've seen it.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
There is a suggested memo on the second part of this. Where the only thing is, you know, provide what your preferred design option, which if it is option, one, just say preferred design option one. So then it's very specific in terms of what my task is supposed to.
So,
That's the action.
so right here, suggested motion on the second
Oh,
page of this
suggested.
memo. If somebody wants to pursue that. And Vika, do we have to identify the funding source?
No, what I would do is, so if you do this motion and put in option one, I will connect with GI. I will let them know that the town is moving forward with option one. When that proposal comes back, there will be cost estimates within that proposal. At that point, I will put that we'll have it as an agenda item with a suggested motion and a suggested location for funding and the total amount. So I would recommend that you hold off on that until we have a better idea.
Yep.
Otherwise, I'm just giving you a ballpark and I don't wanna do that.
So David,
Yeah, I move that we authorize the town administrator to engage with GEI on the preferred design one option for the South Shore Drive project and bring a detailed proposal back to the board for review and approval.
have a second?
Second?
Second, Earhart. Any more discussion about the motion? Okay, all in favor? Unanimous. Yeah. I know it's slow, but we're moving.
Dale's pace for, keep it up, Bruce, you can have the run.
All right. So. 25-103. To review the fiscal year 27 municipal budget process, including the timeline, finance committee involvement, and key recommendations for planning and approval. And so we've had the finance committee sitting here for now a while. And I think, the goal here is really to kind of come to an agreement about how we're gonna, you know, work together on this fiscal year budget. And then Vika also provided in a calendar format, the sort of updated budget schedule. And it is a little bit easier to see when it's on paper like that. And I could bring it up in the communication, but I think it's appropriate to bring it up here, is that I did hear from the school committee chair, Jeff Putnam, and he requested that last year we had a budget presentation in the month of May, I can't remember when it was. And he asked if we would again, you know, plan to do that, where we have the school committee and the select board do a presentation. And it might be appropriate for the finance committee to also do a presentation. So I think So I'm just mentioning that because I think it's something we should add to the calendar, and I would look for some input from the finance committee about when that would be good to do that. And also, you know, if we wanted to even do it on a Saturday morning as opposed to a nighttime meeting. And, typically in the past few years, we haven't mailed out the warrant articles, we haven't mailed out any information about the budget, we put it online. And, some towns have annual reports and that's where all that information goes, so again, I'd look to the finance committee if they have any specific recommendations there, but. I think tonight we just wanna make sure we're on the same wavelength with the finance committee who was good enough to show up tonight. And answer anybody's questions, so. And so we did ask the finance committee, based on our meeting last time, to move their presentation to January 4th. I imagine that didn't break any hearts to get an extra week, so, yeah. Cause they're
14th.
14th, right, Valentine's Day. So,
January.
January.
oh, sorry, okay.
Don't push him another one.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess to start that process, so right now we're on the schedule and talking about the budget process overall. I think the major change that everybody is aware of is we're really trying to tackle the capital on the front end and sort of deal with the departmental budgets on the back end. Obviously, if the departmental budgets have any big ticket items, that needs to be in the capital. I did talk with Jeff, the school committee chair, and said, that would include the school. I know you haven't really crossed paths with them, but if the school has any significant capital requests, they should be including them in this process. And Aaron hasn't really been too tuned in, so I do think one of us somehow should connect with the school and make sure they understand the process, because they should be doing their own capital planning, and you guys are not.
I think they are.
Okay,
I met with Aaron sometime in the last month, and I know that he responds to the emails that we send out to the
Okay.
finance committee. And he looks at base camp where we
okay,
post certain things, so.
so
I think
he's in the
pretty
loop,
well tuned in.
okay. Are you expecting the school committee to submit capital, a asset list and capital info at the same time?
No,
Okay,
no, I think we're kind of looking at the
Municipal
municipal
side.
part, really focused on that.
okay. So I,
Don't expect any surprises from the school committee, so maybe that's part of a discussion. If there's something big, we all need to know about it.
okay. So, and I guess I'm just gonna look for some questions, input from the board on the process as we go forward. I think one thing, what I'd be interested in from the finance committee is what you see the select board's role in the process. I know what I think it should be, and I know what I think the finance committee's role is, but I'd look for your input because as we go through the capital budget, because it came up a little bit tonight. So what do you see our role is as, in the next 2 months?
So on the 14th, I hope we'll lay out a picture of. Here are the departments and the committees, and here are the capital. Expenditure priorities they see, and the timing of those. And from that, we come forward with recommendations for additions to the reserve funds. Okay, and then we're gonna take the new infrastructure projects and make some assumptions around timing and cost. And lay out, if we did all these, what's the bonding cost? So then if you overlay the reserve funds and the bonding cost, how many total dollars is that in fiscal year 27 and going out? And what impact would that have on real estate taxes? So with that picture, and we don't know what that answer is now, our real estate tax is gonna go up 5%, or if we did all that, are they gonna go up 8%, 10%? I mean, if it's the latter, then you're gonna have to say, well, can we move this? What's the priority of all these things? What can be postponed? How do we smooth things out, let's say, or stretch things out?
And
So we're trying to lay out a simple picture.
is it your sense that, you know, we have capacity to do all of the, no, right? I mean, I think I heard you say that last year.
Yeah, a rule of thumb, and this can be used for planning, and again, you know, these are rules of thumb, you know, big fat thumb. Is that a $1 million bond costs $70,000 a year. That's about a 2% tax increase. So you kind of keep those as you're thinking about that's one thing to keep in mind. So when you start, we've just started working on some charts, you know, there's 8 or 10, you know, $1 million coming up in big ticket items. And that would be bonded, all these big, you know, when you get a boat, just, you know, roughly speaking, adds 0.7% to your taxes based on those numbers that we had. So that's where you kind of have to almost start from and go back. What can you
afford?
Right.
No, really, and then work back from there. And that's a simple way. The process that we identified a lot of assets. And again, this is no reflection on what anybody's done in the past. We understand there wasn't really a system. I mean, there was a system, but it was done as well as it could have been. Because many of the numbers in this are unknown in terms of these assets and what they cost and when they have to be redone. So between now and then, you can help by encouraging the departments to respond. Now, they certainly can't look at all their assets and say they're exactly gonna cost this, you know, in 2 weeks. But do their best to try and respond and say, what assets have to be replaced? We've done some, John, you know, went through and juggled some, and we can make some assumptions. But the finance committee can't decide what they need. They have to do that, and then it's what it costs, and then it works all back. So you have two things, one is the big ticket items, one is the reserve accounts, your savings accounts for replacing these assets. And those through this process, this giant, big ugly spread, a big colorful spreadsheet. And I'll give Andrew a lot, he's working very hard on making the process simpler with the database, and he's, you know, that's being worked on, but that's down the road. But all those have to be looked at, not all of them, but we've gotten rid of some of them because of the $20,000 floor on it. But they have to be looked at, and so there's some capital reserves and there's the big ticket items. We can work at looking at how we might do that going forward. The last thing I will say, just a casual watching the process last year, my impression was that there were spreadsheets that were moving around of you know, that would, and so you might start a meeting and say, do you have a spreadsheet? You know, did you get the spreadsheet? You know, talk with Andrew how it's next to impossible to have the spreadsheet and make sure that you get the, you know, what version is it? And they say, well, it's the final, well, it's the kind of final, well, it's almost final, well, it's a probably final, well, it's the final. And then you're going, what do I look at? So my impression was somehow to find, I talked with Andrew about a possible solution for that. So you can all be working on the same spreadsheet. Beak has done a great job at fielding things from people requests and so forth. We're gonna show you how we think we can get a formal capital request so that would be tracked and given to Beak today. But anyway, that was my impression in terms of going forward, is to have however you do it, I don't know, you know, it's not, so that the spreads, you guys have the spreadsheets, you know, kind of before the meetings. Maybe I'm wrong and I misinterpreted that when I watched it, but that would be one thing that I would help as well.
assume there's, you know, a retirement schedule for existing bonds. Are you aware?
Yeah, that's the good news.
Yeah.
Is there's
Two couple
a
of
lot of, there's some significant retirement
the
of
ransom.
existing debt. Right.
Good.
So,
That's what
so we're gonna paint that picture
We're
too.
gonna look at doing that. There's a, if you, the last year's presentation had a graph showing those being retired and how it was gonna go down. So this year, we're gonna update that graph showing how it's not gonna go
We
down.
have that graph.
Might go up.
Yeah, this graph.
But, you know, so this retires and this goes, but anyway, so, and also these things don't have to be all replaced next year or so, you know, so it's not like, but I just always try and tamp down expectations about, you know, because it doesn't, you know.
So in terms of the departments, it's the fire department, public works, are they also doing the marine infrastructure? I mean, not the day-to-day floats, you know, not the,
The day-to-day,
you know,
Coastal Waters is doing the,
they are
Guidance
doing,
and
so
floats.
Coastal Waters is doing
I
that.
believe,
so I had a conversation with Justin recently because I received an email from Coastal Waters with several questions about several different things. And where it was left is, why don't I attend the next meeting, so a lot of these discussions can take place. Because historically, Coastal Waters has done things like submit applications for the float replacement, and then members of Coastal Waters had the communications with the companies who built the floats. But then now it's the assumption that the town is just gonna pick up, but there is no plan of with what was done, who's taken that on. We have a harbor master department, we have a public works department, but where between Coastal Waters and harbor master and public works does float routine maintenance or float infrastructure comes in? So those are the discussions that I would like to have with Coastal Waters and have their recommendation based on what they've done and what they've seen. Who do you suggest? And then at that point, I'll bring that recommendation. And maybe by next year, something like the float maintenance, you know, right now it's fallen on public works. Should it be public works? Should it be harbor master to do that? You know, and hopefully have a little bit better
So-
plan of how that works.
That's why I asked, because I think there's sort of some, you know, there's not a clear path for me that I can see on the marine infrastructure other than the big ticket stuff. So I think Mika can work on
Yeah,
straight,
public works, it's pretty clear, transfer station, it's pretty clear,
and then,
marine infrastructure gets iffy.
and then roads and paving.
paving will be a big number.
And that's another one, right now, it's, I'm the road commissioner, but
Are
there's,
you expecting a number by the 15th of December for work that needs to be done? You're waiting to hear
I'm
back?
hoping that after we meet on Thursday, that we'll have a better idea of what would, if or what would be proposed
So
into
the
the budget.
15th of December was before Christmas, so
Yeah.
hopefully people would do some work. And then we're gonna probably lose a couple weeks,
Right,
and then I like the 14th better than the 7th, so.
yeah.
We'll be
So-
scurrying around to pull the last stuff together there.
Budget process comes quick.
Yeah,
Right, and so it may, even if it's not, I think it would be really helpful if the fire department, and if they need help with their, I mean, have you been working with the fire department?
yeah, so last year, actually, the clerk, Denise, was
Okay.
involved with RAP.
Good.
And she got a copy of what Andrew sent out, and I talked to her, and
Yeah.
she said, oh, I haven't looked at it yet. I said, well, you know, time to look at it, but that was a couple of weeks ago.
Okay,
Um,
so, and if there's something we can do to help, but I think there's a lot of big items for the fire department that are kind of, some are need to have, and then some are want to have, but maybe we can pop them out into the future, but we don't know that, so I think making sure that at least they're all on there. First of all, like air tanks, because sometimes we get a comment like we need to know, we need air tanks, and it comes out of the blue, sort of, so. I think making sure that's as complete as possible, and then people take care of coastal waters, we've got public works, and administration doesn't generally. So, I mean, what other areas are we getting capital item requests from? Besides the town infrastructure kind of stuff,
I
I
don't know
think, and
what
roads.
question.
Roads,
The coastal water and roads have done a good job keeping up, and they're big items, and the fire department.
And the fire department.
But we don't, we don't have the authority to, our approach has been to work with Vika and Andrew and have them,
No, I understand. I just wanna make sure we have it all covered, because I think
yeah,
in the past,
I think we do, from the asset list,
You've got the big.
those lists went out to everybody that has responsible for existing capital assets.
okay,
Andrew did that, yeah.
And
So
then-
then the other thing I hope we have, and I think Mark Roy is working on it, is what's the fiscal year 25 undesignated reserve fund
Right.
balance? And over the last few years, we've had a surplus in those funds, and that worked to reduce real estate taxes.
right,
I'm not sure that's gonna be there this year. And last year, the real estate, the dollars required to be raised for real estate tax were reduced by $250,000 by using that undesignated fund balance. Every $35,000 is 1% real estate tax. 35 into 250 is 7%. So that's a big potential change. So, and we need that money out of that number up front this year. Last year, we didn't, the select board didn't have it until
Never even got.
end of the budgeting discussion, so.
and did I see somewhere that you had an estimated balance? Or did you have an estimated balance for the undesignated fund?
Yeah, I
190.
estimated to be 195,000.
Yeah. which
I
is-
think I guess it'll be 400,000.
Okay,
Because I believe that the town consistently underspends the expense budget by a couple $100,000.
so I think,
But even at 400,000,
right,
You're on the.
that would say by the policy,
we're at the lower.
there's no money to avail.
And so one of the things though, for example, last year, I know how Bob thought about it, so I think we put 700, how much did we put in?
775.
775 into the reserve funds. So I think I get how, in a matter of semantics, in a way, we put in, if we didn't use the undesignated fund to offset taxes, we could have put 500,000 into the reserve funds, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I do think, I noticed some towns have a policy that they only use the undesignated funds for, will only put them into
Yeah.
capital.
I think that's a better way to
Right,
present it to the community. We're gonna take this 200, we're gonna put it.
I would say
We're gonna
though,
apply it to the undesignated reserve.
the school has done the same thing from time to time, and so I do think that if we adopt a policy where we really only use the leftover funds and pour it back into capital reserve funds, that they do the same thing. So that we're all operating on the same principles, and it is, in a sense, semantics, but I think it makes it simpler and cleaner for the community to understand what we're doing with the money. And I do think that by all accounts, maybe we haven't increased our tax rate enough over the past several years.
Yeah, we're also gonna look at how does historic tax increases compare to inflation? And update a chart that we had
Yeah.
last May.
It's
And
hard.
it's below inflation, and it's much lower than
Most
Cumberland
towns,
and Yarmouth and other surrounding communities have that, so.
but not as bad as Long Island, maybe, so we're probably, I don't know, but, so anyway, I think what we're looking at is some pretty big items that we're gonna have to fund, trying to figure out the time frame for those. So that's gonna be the select board's responsibility. The memo we put together on the larger infrastructure projects, we can revisit And we did talk with DOT about, you know, we also have the Cousins Island parking lot and the Cousins Island Wharf. And so there are those projects that aren't, they're in there, but they're not represented financially, and so we should try to get some numbers, so I will take a stab at that. So I think the town can handle these infrastructure projects like we're talking about tonight, and then, you know, the departments will do theirs, and then it will be a pretty scary number, I imagine, in the end, right?
Just a matter of managing it, I mean, it's.
Yeah.
Could be done.
Yep.
And also people should be very aware that a lot of all these big infrastructure. They're big and they were caused by something, and it's nothing, you know, they weren't talking about those 10 years ago. Having to do all this, they're big.
Yeah, it was just the stone pier 10
Right,
years ago.
right, thank you.
But the other thing for us is that we own, or we manage the infrastructure on both sides. And we might be one of the few communities that has that responsibility and doesn't have the state of Maine taking care of one of their piers.
Only one in Quebec?
I believe so, yeah. And we have a barge project kind of in the wings too.
Yeah.
So, okay, did you have a question?
I just have to say, as a select board person and being a novice at this, I think the work that the finance committee is doing is just an unsung hero. It gives me great faith in being able to make informed decisions. And thank you very much, because it's in so many ways, it's over my head, but with listening, I've listened so carefully to your directions. And thank you.
It's a lot of work.
It is
And
a lot of work.
because to be congratulated
Yes.
on being able to do this for these years, because there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So on behalf of what we know that it enables Vika to do, again, thank you for that as well.
All right, so I think, does anybody have any other questions about what our job is? So that meeting on January 14th, everybody really needs to attend. And, the finance committee has been meeting on Fridays, they're meeting this Friday. I would, you know, I think if you can attend, it can really help you understand what's going on. So, you know, you can always, they're open to the public. And you can attend if you want, at some point. I think as we look through the schedule, did anybody have any questions or concerns about the schedule? I think there's a potential that we might, eliminate one of the two, one of the two meetings with the school committee. And, but then add a budget presentation meeting that the finance committee would be part of too. And I think for those people who care about communicating with the public, like Eliza Jane, think about, you know, we really need to think ahead about making sure we get the information out to people. Like sometimes the school committee had a budget meeting where no one showed up. And then you get the questions at town meeting, which is not optimal. So trying to find a good way to get this information out to people is important. And we do have, you know, the Island Fellows that can help us with some of those events, but we do have some pretty big projects coming up for, infrastructure projects that will probably be on the warrant for town meeting in June. We also just wanted to remind people we have a town meeting in January. And I'm hoping that we know the undesignated fund balance at that point, at any rate. But we might have to make small allocations.
Good question. The schedule that we have here is
Yep.
correct, with the exception of one date or a session.
It's correct. I think we just need to add a meeting or substitute a meeting probably in the month of May. We will want to have a budget presentation meeting. And it's not shown on this calendar yet, and I would wanna, the school committee said that they are flexible. And whether we wanna do that on a weekday or whether it would be better to do it on a weekend, I don't know.
So let's keep it as room. The rest of it is clear.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Like weekends.
January 24th, Saturday.
so the month of January is pretty busy, and February, we have a number, so we have a meeting pretty much, every week.
Amend.
Right. So anything else about the budget? Anybody else has? And we need to keep the pressure on to make sure people get their stuff into the finance. And whatever we can do to help. And then, all right, so we're gonna move on to 25-104. And this is to review Ellie Hughes, our former GP Cog fellow. She recommended that the select board consider allocating $2,000 from ETIP funds to be applied to barging costs for the energy collective purchasing project. And you might recall, I brought this up at a prior meeting, and I think it sort of had a lukewarm reception, but we're bringing it up again because Ellie asked. And she did write up a little memo.
Yeah, I don't know that it made it into.
Yeah,
This is
because I
looking
read
at
it.
it, I've not seen that it made it into the packet. I can pull it up and read it.
Well, let me just give some background first, because, so first of all, since Aldrich's here, and he's the guy who applied for the ETIP grant. The ETIP grant came from the Department of Energy. It is the strangest grant I've ever seen. It's a $50,000 award, no criteria, no reporting. So Aldrich could have stuck it in his bank account and gone home, I think, because literally it's very loose. So from that, and we have no specific plans for it at the moment, but you know, I'm sure it could be used for a bunch of things. Some towns have used it, you know, to provide subsidies for energy improvements or to help, you know, low income families, you know, access some of the programs, that kind of thing. But anyway, Ellie's recommendation is that we use some of the funds to pay for the barging costs. So I myself, and I don't know if anybody else here was involved in, I was part of the cooperative group. And unfortunately, Anthony didn't, so I think everybody had an energy audit. Everybody wanted one, had it done, and then I understand they also did some additional ones for other people on the island. So that program went very well. On the weatherization and heat pump installation, I think it was a little bit more bumpy. And it was in part, you know, getting all the stuff over here, and I think things, you know, it's complicated. I think they had some equipment breakdowns, and so then they had to depart because they were kind of at the tail end of the season in terms of barging. So my understanding is that they didn't make it to all of the properties that they have designated for heat pumps and insulation, mine being one of them. And so I did ask Ellie to check in with Anthony and provide an update, because I want to be sure we haven't left some of the property owners who think they're getting a subsidy with that, because the subsidies expire the end of December. And Anthony has left and plans to come back, I think in January, I'm not sure. Have you talked with him at all?
No, I don't know.
So, but technically those folks would not be eligible, particularly heat pump people, for a subsidy. So I kind of want to find out what the status is on that. So frankly, I'd ask that we maybe table this to the next meeting when we can have a full report. And I mean, I do think and I think Eliza Jane agreed, I think it's a good use of the funds, because it's, you know, encouraging people to do energy improvements. Earhart made the point at the previous meeting that, you know, we're sort of singling out kind of, this is private projects, and we're, you know, kind of singling out these people to accept the, you know, to receive these funds, and maybe that's not, again, the best and fairest use of the funds. So I think we can have that conversation later, but I'd like to know where the project stands before you make any financial decisions, because I might consider, if people thought they were gonna get a subsidy and weren't, I'd be more inclined to provide that than transportation costs, which gets split by 10 or 20 people, so that's not as big a deal. And we did get, you know, I think all of the services were offered at somewhat of a discounted price because of the fact that it was a collection of people, so people already benefited financially somewhat by having it done as a group. So, and I think it was an ambitious program. And I'm not assigning fault to anyone. We were really trying to jam it in
Right.
at the end, before the end of the year, and then Ellie left prematurely, so the combination of factors, I think. And, you know, but fortunately, Anthony said he'll be back. It's not like he won't come back. And he's a really good guy to work with. I really like him a lot. I just think he had the island shock, like a lot of us.
And I realized what was late in the year to start with.
Yeah.
He was up against it.
But he made it to your place, so that's.
So that's because I bugged him off.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's good. It's not like he didn't perform. He's just, and he had some, I don't know, some equipment problems while he was here. But I thought it was a great idea. I'm glad Ellie tried it. I think given more time, it would have been fully successful. So anyway, but let's find out what the status is and then we'll take it up at the next meeting.
Great.
Okay. So then the last thing on tonight's agenda is 25-105. Review the select board's assignments and progress to date from the select board retreat. And I asked Vika to put this on here because, you know, we have this retreat, we come out without these great ideas, and then what happens? Maybe nothing. So, and, you know, I myself am on the list of, you know, maybe, you know, people who haven't done all the things you're supposed to do. And Vika, you put a memo in the packet, right?
There's a memo in the packet, and in the memo, there's just kind of a brief little table that kind of outlined what the priorities were and who was tasked with them. I did put dates to the right,
Yeah.
but the things that I was tasked with, and the dates just indicated when I made contact with whoever that individual that I was supposed to make contact with.
So if people don't mind, and I just think it's easier to do as a group, we can just go through the table and kind of get a status report and sort of figure out where we're going from here, because, you know, some of these may be more important than others, but I think it's important just to revisit this. We're months past the, you know, 4 months or so from the retreat. So for barging, I'm trying to remember so we were gonna potentially draft a fact sheet, and I think that was really just to make sure that everybody is up to speed on kind of where things stand. So the regulatory decision that we're still waiting for this advisory opinion. So I think once we get that might be the appropriate time to prepare a fact sheet. And when we talked with GEI, I think their expectation is we'll hear by the end of the year. So that's the time frame on that. So we should be getting the opinion by, you know, 12/31/25, and then we can prepare. I think the idea of a fact sheet, and Earhart, I think it was your idea, is just to have sort of some talking points that people, you know, everybody's on the same page. This is where we're at right now. And they don't have to come to a select board meeting to find out necessarily.
Or plus keeping our own brain on the page
Right.
and not wandering off into the weeds, right?
Like-
That's just
Yep.
elevating that
Yeah.
challenge.
You know, that's a helpful suggestion.
So the next thing is the CTC agreement, and so the comment there was to evaluate how well the responsibility is shared between the town, CTC, and Maine DOT for financially sustainable maintenance of the stone wharf and the parking lot given stakeholder needs. And so that's a big ticket item. Sort of, you know, understanding what our relative responsibilities are, but in the context of sort of the capital improvements we're gonna have to make, it's probably a discussion we should have. And so you guys had a meeting with CTC recently?
We did, and it was really, in general, looking at the lay of the land. Vika had prepared a very ambitious agenda that we got through the first item, but it really gave us good roadmap. The next meeting is January 15, and I think there are some clear things that we need to work at. I believe one of the things we'll be talking about are what are the issues that need to be addressed, and then prioritizing them, very similar to the process that we had here on the select board. So they include everything from it includes a lot. There's some agreements that need to be revisited, some agreements that we don't hold anymore. Like with the town of Cumberland, with Route 1 parking lot we need to look at. In any event, I feel like we have a good,
I
Sure.
think so, we did, am I right, because that when we seceded, everything that was town of Cumberland transferred to the town of Shabby,
but it's not in the agreement.
but it was in the legislation.
It is,
Okay.
yes,
Oh, well, that
but
wasn't-
there are some agreements, so like Town of Cumberland has an agreement with CTC about Route 1, which is separate from the agreements that Town of Cumberland had with Yarmouth, that now the Town of Cumberland is the Town of Shabig, and
Right.
so,
Okay,
there. Yes, but there are some agreements that I think need to be revisited to make some of the clerical changes,
Mhm.
but also revisit some changes just because.
Yep.
A lot has changed in the last 25 years since, or however many years it's been since these agreements have been made.
And I do think since we are gonna be pursuing maybe some funding, that sort of making that a priority to get all those ducks in a row in terms of our agreements would be worthwhile, because it did come up in our meeting with DOT. Kind of, even on the Cousins Island parking lot, kind of what the structural arrangement is. So I think trying to clean up all that stuff would be good. And I do think, to be frank, that we may have to look at, the use of the infrastructure and the financial contribution to the use of the infrastructure, or some other, some way of, looking at the cost benefit for all of this. So we can talk about that later, but
Yeah.
so bottom line is, you guys, the subcommittee is attending some of the CTC meetings.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, moving on to the Stone Pier. So I think so that one is basically, moving along with the design and, preparing ourselves to start to, maybe do some construction there. I think we are moving in that direction.
Do we have we're gonna have a subsequent date, post our comments back to them? Is there a date?
So Lisa sent her comment, she summarized those comments and sent them back to us. Now they've had a change in management, so a
Right.
change in configuration. We met with them today to talk about that, but I think the next step is, the next step will be for them to the new team to kind of get up to speed. And then we suggested a meeting with Chris Mayo. They were gonna make some changes based on the comments that we made.
Right,
And they were just making sure they understood those correctly. Based on, now that it's a new group of people, slightly different. Some of the same people are still involved, but Dan Bannon, who was kind of running the show, is not there anymore. So I think the big questions that came up were, pedestrian walkway and parking, north or south, the requirements to reduce the park, some of the same things we went over in the meeting. So I think they're gonna come back with some design adjustments, right?
They were gonna come back with some design adjustments. A recommendation was made by the town to meet with GEI and with Chris Mayo.
DOT, yeah.
And and correct me if I'm wrong, is so there's the large grant that the town would like to apply for. That could be up to $2 million for construction. GEI is aware of that. That grant opens up in January. There is a very short window of only 6 weeks of when it opens to when things need to be submitted. So GEI, with that in mind, is gonna work to have us to as close of a 30% design as they can based on the work that's been done so far. So we can have that information for the submission. Prior to doing that, hopefully set up a meeting with them and Chris Mayo. And in the process, also have a presentation to the select board.
Right.
Before it gets submitted before the grant gets submitted. So between now and the end of January, I think you're gonna see, hopefully.
Yeah.
If there aren't any hiccups and delays, there's gonna be a big push of the town working with GEI and DOT towards having a far more concrete understanding of what the steps will be for the Stone Pier.
and will that include parking and Wharf Road as well?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I do think, and maybe there were some minor changes that we suggested, but I think as soon as they can provide even some draft plans for everybody to look at, then they'll make a presentation to the select board. Maybe in a workshop kind of format.
Yeah.
And so I think that will happen realistically in January. And, but we're kind of honing in on like, this is it, guys, and we're moving forward. And so, and I do think that we met with DOT, Chris Mayo, who is the only harbor guy at DOT, but he's a very key player. And so keeping him in the loop and making sure there are no red flags so that if we do submit an application for funding, we've covered all our bases.
What's his suggestion?
The funding you're talking about is through DOT?
DOT has a large waterfront infrastructure grant program that has been highly advertised. Everybody I know is applying for it or has waterfront infrastructure, working waterfront infrastructure, but we did get an indication that we are well positioned to, and this time the money, we did get a grant before for design. This one includes construction up to $2 million with a 5% match. Last time it was a 50% match. So we want to try to do what we can. So we really, I mean, it's worth $2 million to put the pedal to the metal. And so it's GEI that we're gonna have to really keep the pressure on because they've had a change in staffing. It's normal for things to kind of lag a little bit as people get up to speed, but we are gonna keep the pressure, we're gonna have to keep the pressure on. So that's between Earhart and myself, and then, we'll make a presentation on the select board. It might require an extra meeting. If it does, we're gonna do it, because we don't wanna miss that window.
Later, we had the draft fact sheet thing, which, we're sort of doing that. I'm in a rolling thing, so.
Right.
So here was. That will be essentially the fact sheet at that point, because we're getting very close to having the plan, so.
Yep. And, there'll be things people don't like about, we're not at the point now where we're gonna be making lots of changes to the plan. So, I mean, I think we'll just, it's the best we can do with all the input that we received to date, but, on the housing, so Eliza Jane's working on the housing task force. We did receive, and I did confirm, we received a $50,000 grant from the Housing Opportunity Program, 10,000 of which can be used specifically for sort of a housing roadmap. So that funding is available to the housing committee if they want to hire an outside expert to help them prepare that roadmap. And I think we'll be asking all the committees to report, usually in February. We basically send out a request for all the town committees to prepare an annual report early in the new year, just on where they're at and what they're doing. So maybe you can give us an update then on that. But anyway, there is some money available. I also I need to request, let them know that we're not gonna use the funds until this next year, and I don't think that's a problem, but, anyway.
Okay, and where do I access information on criteria for that $10,000?
It's basically, I'll send it to you, it's actually on the grant, it's on the SharePoint site, under grants, under housing grant, and it's $10,000 for what we called in the grant, a housing roadmap, and I think I think you can deviate somewhat from that.
Okay.
There's, the rest of the money is to be used for the comprehensive plan. And that's for, expertise to help with the comp plan. So, all right, and then beach erosion, that was Ellie, and it's been switched to Loren, and she has done quite a bit, I think. That was the resolution that we passed. She's also been doing all the work on the shorefront access, so she's done quite a bit to move the ball forward there. And then we also had a separate grant to look at updating the ordinance on shorefront stabilization. That we have a draft of that now, which we can share with the board. But it's not on the top of my priority list at the moment. So anyway, we've had a couple grants, we've done quite a bit on that. The South Shore Drive, I think we were up to speed on that based on tonight, so I think we're ready to move forward with, with trying to get a design. One of the things that will be challenging here is, to, get some contractors who will actually bid on that project, and so I think we may wanna, we can talk with GEI, but we may wanna actually solicit interest from a few contractors for that. The other thing on that is that I think this whole issue of private and, the offer of private money could be very good, it's great. I would recommend that if we, we don't know where we're at yet, but if we are gonna consider that, what I'd like to do is set up a meeting with the town attorney and the board to really kind of understand the process, and have him provide advice to the entire board collectively, so we know how to move forward, because it's a complicated thing, and I don't even feel great relaying what I think he says to you guys, so. But I don't think we need to do that right at the moment. I think that's something that, once we figure out what we might need, we can, solicit his advice on that. But he clearly said to us, at least for South Shore Drive, given the magnitude of the project and stuff, that request would have to be approved by a town meeting. So if we decided we want to pursue that, then we would want town meeting to weigh in on that. So. And then, so the other two low hanging fruit items, I did contact the Office of Community Affairs. I haven't heard back from them. I might put Loren on that because she's the one that's gonna be working on the comp plan. They just moved to a new location, so it may be really what they're looking at. Bennett's Cove, we're waiting to hear back on the, advisory opinion, and then I think the stakeholder workshop. I mean, you guys did meet with them, but I think we're sort of on hold there for the moment, I would say, with any communications with the stakeholders.
Yeah, the consensus was that when we get closer to spring, summer, when a lot of the abutters are back in town, that we revisit and, they were in agreement to have a discussion with a facilitator, so then it could be better engaged and what they're saying could be better understood by the community and by the town. And so we really left it with, let's revisit this in spring and see, where things stand.
And I think, where that advisory opinion goes will dictate kind of where we go, so we might as well see what that turns out to be. So we did talk about an island summit between Long Island and Shebig, and there's a significant amount of interest from Long Island. They are very interested in having a joint meeting with Shebig. And we're talking about a meeting that extends beyond just the select boards, but might include planning board, school committee, kind of the municipal committees that people interact with. I think we face some of the same challenges, sort of somewhat different communities, but we share a lot of the same challenges. So I would suggest that the next step, so I did contact Long Island. There, a number of people, I had a meeting with the select board tonight about something else, but there's a lot of interest. So I would suggest we have Deepa contact Brian Dudley, their town administrator, and they could start to work towards really picking a date. And I think later in the sort of spring, well, I don't know, you guys can figure out when, not in the early part of budget season, because I think we're gonna be pretty maxed out, but you and Brian could decide. But I think we're talking about a summit, and I think we could likely get some help facilitating that from the Island Institute or Loren or.
Prior to the summit, I'm not familiar with the lay of the land for the town of Long Island, and I'm sure they have people on their select board not familiar with it here. So I'd like to have an opportunity to welcome people from Long Island that are stakeholders in the summit, as well as being able to go to Long Island. So that, it just adds another step, but wherever we have the meeting, I just need to be more familiar with what the issues are and what their facilities look like and what they're looking at over there.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe we can
In
arrange
preparation.
sort of a field trip for people who wanna become more familiar. I think Vika, myself, and I don't know, I'm pretty familiar with Long Island myself, I
Right.
haven't worked with them, but I think that's something she could discuss as sort of, you know,
Okay.
an opportunity. Their comp plan is very new and I think really summarizes their situation pretty well, so that would be a place to start.
Okay, I mean, ideally it would be on the same day. One group goes to that island, the other in the morning and afternoon, or some way to
I
make
think
it.
they'll be a lot harder to coordinate than.
Yeah, and I-
Getting two, I mean, you know how difficult it is to
Oh, I
get
know.
to one island and come back to the other. I think that's an ambitious goal.
Yeah.
It is, but, well, Casco Bay lands, you can hop on, hop off. It's like the hop on, hop off bus, if you know how to read the schedule.
Not to
think-
get to Long Island, you can't hop
No,
on and
I
hop
have
off
to-
easily. You really have to pay attention to that.
Yeah, ask
It's
Ellie.
very difficult.
Ellie, who didn't make it over for her meeting to Long Island because she got all mixed up on the boats. But anyway,
Okay.
I think that's a good suggestion, but I'm not, I mean, we'll see how much
But we'll see what
interest
we
in
can-
that. I think my goal is to make sure we can at least have the joint meeting. So that, and it might be that that's the first time some of the school committees connect or whatever, but I think there's value in that, even if it's the beginning of a conversation. I think they are down to 4 students in their school, 2 of which are from Great Diamond Island. So they are really concerned about that. And if Shabig wasn't importing students, we would be right behind them. I did hear from you that the daycare, we have 2 students at the daycare on a regular basis, so, you know, we
Low
have.
census and a few in the pipeline.
Right, so they're all facing the same demographics, the affordable housing issues. And so I think you know, and we've talked about potentially even combining forces for some things. We sort of do share rescue and fire as much as we can. So I think there's some places we could collaborate, but I also think this is the beginning of a conversation. And I don't want to assume too much on terms of what they want. We are working on a joint wildfire project, so it's a good time to do it, you know.
We did attempt to do this, I think, about 2 years ago, and there was a decent momentum, but.
And way back, Beek and I met with a couple of the select board member, or the select board member and the town administrator, but it's not the same as bringing the 2 communities together. And I spoke with Kim Hamilton and, you know, a couple other people. I think we could get some help on convening something.
Okay.
So. Even if it's just to kind of support each other. Fact sheet on the stone pier, same thing, and then broadband, the point of the broadband comment was. That other people are coming in trying to poach broadband customers with, you know, Fidium and other ones, and so it's really just. Making sure people that, you know, sign up for Axiom, stay with Axiom, because if we lose our customer base, that could be a problem.
Right, but I think the other thing was, then you sent the letter out to them.
Yeah.
And that was 2 weeks ago. Any response?
The letter with a lot of thought put into it was sent out with the information about what is still owed. And I also recommended that we have, like it was talked at the summit, have maybe a little gathering or something to try to encourage people to get them to understand to stay with Axiom. I did receive a confirmation that it was received, and that once they have a chance to go through what I wrote, they would circle back to me. That has not happened. I did make a note to circle back and remind a response to that email. So I'll do that either tomorrow or next week and follow up with that.
Because when is the anniversary of, we were talking about an anniversary celebration?
So it's been a year since the town has been fully operational. It was last fall when the customers started coming on, and so from the retreat, the recommendation was to try to connect with Axiom and have kind of, it's been a year, let's connect and have a little, whether something here or whatever, to try to get the community together, and then utilize that as an opportunity to reiterate to people the importance of stay with Axiom and not go into other companies, because it is a town-owned business.
It will certainly be nice if they're all paid up at the time we have that meeting so that we can show that the plan is actually working.
Yes.
And I think somebody asked this question, technically, there should be enough subscribers to cover the cost.
Oh, yeah, more than.
Which is concerning, that means money's going somewhere else, and so I think, you know, we could reach out to the Island Institute, who work with Axiom on a number of island projects, and see if they could help if you want. I don't know if that's something you're interested in.
Help, I guess, with
Help communicate with Axiom and try to, I think it might be helpful to let them know that we're having difficulties, because they've worked with a number of small communities, you know, with Axiom, and I just think, you know, it could be, I would want to find out, you know, they're insolvent the hard way, and, you know.
Is Fidium doing this with other communities as well? We're probably,
Well, we haven't really seen Fidium out here except in the mail, but they are definitely, around town I'm working with, they did the same thing. I think Axiom is their provider.
it is.
So they did the same thing we did, and Fidium is in town trying to, and they are successfully kind of promoting their service while the town is trying to, you know, build theirs. So
Yeah,
it's
we don't
definitely,
get on.
yeah, I think that's a separate problem.
Yeah, but if you're an average consumer,
You
you're
wouldn't
gonna
know.
go for what the best. So I think the general public might not really fully understand to the degree that a town is wrapped into
Right.
it. It's. If Axiom fails on Shabig, town of Shabig is gonna be impacted by that, and I think that's where
The other
maybe
side.
bringing it into a more of a community involvement. And having it be more
The other
positive.
selling point is Axiom is mandated to keep their price fixed for the next 4 years now. And anybody like Fidium comes in with a cheaper
They
rate.
do, and then.
As soon as Axiom goes away,
Right.
we know what's gonna happen. We're gonna lose
Yeah.
that fixed
But
rate. So that's an important.
I
sell.
guess, you know, I think everybody, Vika shared the letter she sent to Axiom. I think it's pretty clear. They are paid up for fiscal year 25, but now for fiscal year 26.
So, well, no, the fiscal year 25. Because there has been more subscribers than. The agreement was if it's above a certain number, then it's an additional $5 per subscriber. And then the cost of insurances, and so once we went through the full detail of all of that. Those costs put it, so they weren't fully paid up
Okay.
to the previous fiscal year, so there's still a small balance from the previous fiscal year. And the statement for the first quarter payment has not been paid up, and so all that information was outlined, that
Right.
information was put in the SharePoint too, for you to see all those details. And that's the email I had received confirmation that it was received by Mark, and that he would get back to me, and I have not heard back yet.
Oh.
And so I will follow up to
So-
remind that.
How does the board feel? Do you wanna just let things play out? Do you want me to contact? It would be Nick Baptista at the Island Institute.
I think give Vika a little chance to just
Okay.
hear back from them, give them another reminder.
And then I can report at the next
Okay.
meeting and then
And
see
then,
what
and I
happens.
think we do what other avenues and maybe.
But I think that because we have such a dedicated community. Making sure that we are communicating the importance of subscribing to our municipal service. That's not always clear. That's not clear to a lot of people.
No, it isn't, in fact,
At all.
Axiom, but people don't think of it.
They don't think of it as municipal.
Right, right,
So I-
that's kind of a branding thing.
I like the idea of having. A promotion to the community about that, that could be from the town website or from. And sent out to our media outlets. But making sure that islanders know and our people who subscribe know
how important it is to support our municipal.
Yeah, but then again,
I don't
we
think.
need to
it's
get this
really-
issue resolved, because I don't wanna have this hanging over us when we're trying to communicate.
Yeah, I would say that we try to get the, you know, the bill paid up and then kind of celebrate, you know.
Right.
And pay the
Success, yeah.
But I think that's a good point.
I mean, if we put something in the island calendar, that a little ad. For replacement, something and just say, hey. I need go accent. And it's like, just explain the town's relationship to it.
That would be really good too. Put a random.
There- I think there's,
It was doing really well about on a monthly thing, and you guys, one of you was supposed to put something, I think Richard was supposed to put something in and drop the ball, so.
Okay, oh, that would be good.
It's your,
All
so
right.
you've got a few.
Gave me something
And the deadline is noontime on the dot, not,
Oh, I
not
know that.
12:01.
But what's?
Believe me, I've done that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to get out of here so Eliza can
Yes.
catch her boat. So we're moving on to other business. And, Vika, did you have any other business?
Yeah, I have a few things, kind of other business communications, I'll share them all now, so, one is, the town did receive a notice from CTC that they are going to be discontinuing what they call Flex Pass program. So the town has historically had 3 parking spaces for the town of Shebeg Island down at, the Cousins Island parking lot. Historically, town administrators who commuted, had a parking, we had one for the code enforcement officer and we had one for the sheriff. These were all paid passes. The last couple of years with the transition of personnel, and the town administrator pass not being needed to be provided for, Cousins Island, we transitioned to having 2 of the 3 passes be flex passes, and flex pass allowed anybody to be able to park in that lot for town business. So the flex pass was used by the code enforcement officer, Ellie, things like that. So it allowed versus 1 person for us to use it. So they are getting rid of that, because it's difficult for them to administer it. And so what they're doing is they're making it so so if we choose not to get an annual pass for the code enforcement officer, we would pay a daily rate for every person. So we figured out the math for the code enforcement officer. It's not cost efficient for the town. It is for CTC, but not for the town to have us pay every single week a daily rate for the code enforcement officer. So, where we stand now is we submitted an application for 2 passes, one for the sheriff and one for the code enforcement officer. And then any additional people that would need it would be first come, first served basis, which it makes it a little bit, tricky, because if we have somebody coming for town purposes and we don't have a flex pass and it's first come, first served, and all the contractors get there by 7 AM, then it could put us in a position where we don't have the same ease of using that parking lot that we did before. And so that is a big change.
can they
that-
just designate spots, 2 spots, put a sign there, town should be parking only?
Well, they have 5 Yarmouth spots.
Right.
Yarmouth has designated spots. CTC has 2 designated spots in the Stone Pier.
Right.
So if that's a discussion that you want me to raise, I'd be happy to do so. But right now, where things stand, the town is going to be paying for 2 passes. So that's, one of them is a commuter pass, which is the over 1,000, what is it?
1,400.
$1,300.
Oh, there's no, yeah, 1,000.
Yeah, and the other one is the $1,000 one. And so the sheriff, the town pays for a Cumberland County Sheriff's vehicle, which sits in the parking lot for 3 months. We pay the $1,000 parking to have it access for just, for that, so. If the town, if you guys want me to raise that conversation about whether a couple parking spots be designated specifically to the town,
Yeah.
I'm happy to
It's
raise
the same
that.
deal, I mean, basically, it's our spot and we're paying for the full year's worth, and what's it to them? That which of our people is using that space? We can't park more than one car at a time in the space, so.
Well, and the difference is that, you know, that's not how. I mean, we all have stickers for our individual
Right.
cars and my daughter can't park there if I'm not there, but I do think the town leases the lot to CTC. And I think the town should, I would agree, I think the town should ask for 2 designated spots. No questions asked as long as they're on town business.
Right.
And if we have to come up with a town sticker, we come up with a town sticker,
Yeah.
but it is unpoliced on the Yarmouth 5 spots. Because Yarmouth is responsible for policing that, not CTC. So that's a whole nother issue, but I do think it's reasonable. We give them 2 designated spots on the stone pier. It seems reasonable to ask, given that the code enforcement officer is only here 1 day a week. The sheriff is here truck is here for 3 months, but they're not even using it. So at any rate, I do think, it's reasonable to request sort of quid pro quo that we have 2 designated spots.
Maybe this is escalation, but maybe we should start charging for the spots on the stone maintenance.
Well, I don't wanna go there, I agree though, but I also think that frankly, it's a little wacky in my brain. I mean, I didn't realize this till I got on the board, but we lease the lot to CTC and then they charge us
Yeah.
for spaces.
Yeah.
Why are we doing that? So I do think that I would recommend that we ask the, you know, Vika to pursue that conversation. I think it might require ultimately you guys to look at the agreement, but you know, they didn't come to us and say, what happens if we get rid of the flex pass? It just eliminated it. So I think we're in a good position to sort of make this request.
Are there other organizations on the island that also have flex passes? Does it only apply to the?
So I know the school had 5, I don't know what the status of,
The
That
the
is-
school told me that they thought, they have a contract, so it's a little bit different. So they have a contract with I think it's a 3-year contract, I don't
What
remember,
about
but
the
they.
commons?
The commons might be, they may have a flex pass, I don't know, I haven't talked to them, but I do feel. I get that there are other people that might be affected, but I do think we should. Stick to the town, the town leases to CTC. Here are the conditions, we want 2 designated spots for the town, which I think would meet our needs most of the time. Because it isn't okay, because it has happened, where we have people coming over to come to the town and they cannot park there. It's happened multiple times last summer, even when we had a flex pass space that was available to us. And I was with one of the individuals with the Maine Forest Service, and had we not been there, they would have sent them away. And so, you know, that is not okay. We need them to be able to come over on town business. So,
Do we know with the Yarmouth spaces that are designated, how often those are used by non-Yarmouth residents? Do we have an idea about that?
no,
Okay,
the few Yarmouth folks that I know that they're pretty religious at making sure they use them and they don't abuse them.
I think the Yarmouth people are very good. I think I've seen contractors in those.
Yeah, no.
And I've been told by I've been told to park there if there's no place else. Because I'm a ticket holder, you know.
yeah.
So anyway, I think, given the change on CTC's end,
Mhm.
we should try this, and I don't think we should pay anything. You know,
That was gonna be my next question. If you're gonna ask me to request 2 designated spots, are they free?
yeah,
Wouldn't this be
It's not free,
something to
but-
talk about with the CTC committee? Or do you want to approach it first with?
Well, so
The director.
the applications were due.
Right.
Yeah.
And we submitted those applications and I held back the check because of the warrant process. And I put a note in the application saying that would be
Okay.
coming later. So if we wait until January,
Do it now. I would support having you do it now. Thank
I'll
you.
ask.
yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody asking.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I think we would say as a condition of our lease, to the sublease to them, we want two designated spots.
Right.
Yeah,
Agrees, are we?
and I think it's not unreasonable.
Yeah, we'll pay for the signage. For spots.
Right.
Good.
And to
Thank
be
you.
honest, we have had discussions, just to put it in context with DOT about, you know, adapting the lot to make it more flood-proof. That cost right now would be on the town. So here we are potentially paying to adapt the lot. We don't receive any revenue off that lot. I mean, I gotta say, DOT was like, huh? So we're not making any money to pay for the costs to improve the infrastructure, but we're gonna have to pay for it. So like that maybe is not a good position for the town to be in, just for future reference.
Good job.
All right,
The next thing is I had a brief conversation with Bob Ernest, who contacted me as a representative of Sika, because he had been contacted by residents of South Shore Drive, because of them trying to find a source that they can funnel money through. And so Sika, Bob, as a representative of Sika, wanted to know where and what the town's position was, so they can make sure that whatever recommendation they give to these residents was in alignment with what the town's wishes were. What I told him was that at that point, no decisions had been made. The board had not decided to take on any private funds. They didn't even have a decision on which option to move forward. And so the town, you know, didn't have a position towards that. And then the other was a communication from Bruce Anderson, which I forwarded to all of you today, which he basically rephrased a lot of his questions this evening. So those were the three things that I had written down to mention to you. So.
anybody else on the communications or other business? All right, so next on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the November 19th meeting, which, Chris had sent to us. Anybody have any changes to those minutes? Nope, okay. Can I have a motion?
Move to
Richard?
approve the minutes from November 19th, 2025.
Great, second? David, second. Any more discussion on the minutes? All in favor? Great. So items to be placed on a future agenda, so we have Earhart, you had made your request, I have it written down. Is that something you want on the next meeting?
Yeah, I think it's something we need to really talk about.
Okay, so, and then also revisiting the energy project thing with Ellie, once we hear back from Ellie.
By the way, besides the signage, I guess it was talking to Chuck Elder, someone pretty well trashed, one down by Chandler's, you know, with the down by the beach in the parking area there, went in there, I guess, with a truck, hit a tree.
Oh.
Did donuts, I don't know, made a mess down there.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay,
So it's been probably the same crowd, but
maybe.
Down in Chandler's Beach area?
the beach, yeah, not on the beach, but in the, the parking area.
The parking area or down in the,
I don't think down in the woods, but somebody hit it, and I don't remember, I'd have to find exactly where he said, but like a tree got hit, clearly somebody had gone into a tree with a vehicle.
If you've looked at the roads lately, you can see there's a lot of vehicle activity.
There was a sheriff out today. They finally had some, extra personnel that they were able to distribute, some bodies to Chevy, so hopefully they'll keep having manpower so they can sprinkle in visits sporadically through the winter.
But we've certainly been hearing vehicle activities, and I just hope no one gets hurt, besides the fact though that they are, you know, potentially damaging. And so we did get grant funds to deal with both Jenks Road and Chandler's. And so the boulders went up to prevent people from driving over the stream, which they were doing. And that seemed to land without a whole lot of problems, but I haven't been down
We got
there.
them on video.
Yeah, so maybe it's cameras everywhere, I don't know.
Well, you know, I mean, I don't really wanna be, you know,
Yeah.
Hong Kong, but, or China, but, you know. I think we know we have some trouble areas and it might be worth it and they're not very expensive.
Okay, so we'll take that up and, you know, maybe make an effort to look at that area. Between now and then, cause it's, you know, it's not like we have a 40-person public works department to go down there and fix everything either.
Right.
So like, they don't need other stuff to do.
Or law enforcement presence is preventive.
Okay. All right, anything else for items on a future agenda? Okay. All right, so then I'd like to have a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
So,
Second.
yeah. Second,
So.
oh, Richard, okay. We're.
I-
All in